Species. Unite.
He called me into his office and he said, "You see that picture above my desk?" I said, "Yes." And it kind of looked like an animal that reminded me of a squirrel, actually. He said, "That is a lemur that we think is extinct in the wild. If you can, please go to Madagascar and find out if it's extinct or not."
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Novogratz. This is Species Unite. We have a favor to ask. If you like today's episode and you have a spare minute, could you please rate and review Species Unite on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts? It really helps people to find the show. This conversation is with Dr. Patricia Wright. Patricia is an anthropologist, a conservationist, and a professor at Stony Brook University in New York. And she's probably the world's leading expert on lemurs. Lemurs only exist in one place, and that is the island of Madagascar. Patricia spends about half her time, 6 months a year, in Madagascar studying lemurs. And she's done this since the 80s, when she discovered a new species of lemur and also established a national park. It's almost an understatement to say that Patricia is a trailblazer. She's done the impossible again and again.
I'm Dr. Patricia Wright, Distinguished Professor of Anthropology at Stony Brook University.
I am so excited to be here at Stony Brook University with you, Pat. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to go way back because I read your book. I've delved into your life in big ways. First of all, like I was saying to you as we were walking here, I really can't believe no one's made a documentary about you because your life is astonishing. Let's go way back when you were a social worker in New York.
It's amazing because when I was a child, I always loved animals. And I always knew that I wanted to be working with animals if it was possible, but I didn't think it was possible. When I got my first job after being a biology major, it was a job in social work in New York City. Very different than what I ended up doing. But then one day, when I was going, actually, this was the 60s, and, a lot was going on musically in those years. And my husband and I had tickets to go see Jimi Hendrix at the Fillmore East. And we were very excited about this extraordinary concert we were about to hear. We got there early and we already had our tickets, so we looked around for something to do. And there across the street from the Fillmore was a pet shop called Fish and Chips. And we went over there and walked in, and it was like walking into the Amazon. It was so hot and humid, and there were all these animals. There were macaws, and there were other kinds of birds, and there were monkeys. And I went up to this monkey that was in a cage, and he looked at me, and he had these huge, big brown eyes, and I put my finger up toward the cage, and he reached out and held on to my finger, like, rescue me. And I thought, oh my goodness, what a really nice animal. But, I didn't know what kind of monkey he was. So I asked the shopkeeper, and he said, it's called a night monkey. And I said, well, what does it do? And he said, I don't know. It sleeps all day. I went to the New York Public Library, and I found out that it was a nocturnal monkey from South America. So I went back on Monday, and I did that terrible thing that none of you should ever do. I bought a monkey at a pet store.
Well, disclaimer, it was the 60s. People didn't know any better. Like, we didn't.
We really didn't
The world
know.
was totally different.
That's true.
The fact that we even had monkeys in pet stores is so beyond, just baffling. But people didn't know.
They didn't know. And hopefully they do now.
I hope so.
That's how my career actually started, because I am a scientist and I got really curious about what this animal would be doing in the natural habitat. So I looked at the books that were in the New York Public Library, and I realized that the northernmost range of this kind of monkey was supposedly in Panama. But I looked at the map, and it was totally forested up to Costa Rica. So I decided to go to Costa Rica and extend the range of this little monkey. So I went into my boss, and I told him, I quit. And the boss looked at me, and he said, why are you quitting? Because I had been working there for a number of years and doing a pretty good job. And he said, why are you quitting? And I said, well, I have to go to the Amazon and get my monkey a mate. And he said, why don't you just take a leave of absence? And I said, okay. So anyway, we went and we obtained a monkey. Well, I got desperately ill in Costa Rica, really sick. And I said to my husband, Jim, I've got to go home. I mean, I just can't go on anymore. And he said, well, let's go to a Caribbean island. Let's get away from the rainforest, Let's go to a place where there's lots of sun and beach. You'll be fine. So we went to a small island off the coast of Costa Rica, and I got sicker. And then there was a big storm. A hurricane came in, and the airport was closed. The hospitals were actually on strike. It was like, I really was worried I wasn't going to make it back home. Eventually, the waters went down, and we got me back to New York, and I went immediately into the hospital. And they gave me every test for tropical diseases. I was very dehydrated. And the next day, the doctor came, and he said, Mrs. Wright, the good news is you don't have any tropical diseases at all. You're pregnant. And I was like totally in shock. It's the last thing I thought was wrong with me. But of course, that news changes your whole life around. And I quit my job the day that Amanda was born and became a Brooklyn housewife. Now, it's really different when suddenly you're not going to the office every day, and instead you're changing diapers and cooking food, and it was quite a shock. After 2 weeks, we had a real surprise. Amanda was 2 weeks old when Flower, the little baby monkey, was born to Kendra and Herbie.
So you had 2 babies in the house.
2 babies in the house, both little girls. But there was a real difference, because in their family, my family, I was staying home with a kid, and I was, he went off to work every day, got home late. Meanwhile, I was, cooking and cleaning and doing everything that you do, mostly childcare. And in their little relationship, suddenly I noticed that Herbie, was taking care of the baby. The mother, of course, she's a mammal, so she nursed it, and then she would give it a little nip. The baby would cry, and the male monkey, the father, would come over, take the baby, and take care of it until the next nursing time. Just amazing. I was observing something that was a surprise, because we had been hearing about Jane Goodall's chimps and the mother-child relationship between the chimps, and we'd been hearing about baboons and how males protected the females, but they didn't do anything with childcare.
Well, and this is such a different time. It's like, 1970 or not even yet?
Yeah, it's the 1970s.
And so there was no internet. Nobody could look any of this up. It was like there wasn't a lot of knowledge out there.
It was the beginning of the sexual revolution, too. I knew that if we had an example in our primate order of males taking care of the kids, that's a really important model for us human females. So I was very excited about it. So I wrote it immediately to National Geographic and explained that I had to go down to South America and find out how this system had evolved. How did this system come to be in its natural habitat? And National Geographic wrote back and said that I had to have a PhD in order to do research. So I wrote to Jane Goodall because I know she had National Geographic money. And I don't think my letter ever got to her, to tell you the truth. And then I called my mom and I said, Mom, what am I going to do? I really have to understand how this system evolved. I think it's important for all of us. And she said, well, I know a woman in the Rochester area who actually made a contribution to somebody who sounded a little bit crazy at the time, but it worked out for her. And that was George Eastman and Kodak Company, which is a very profitable film company for those of you that
were born in the past. Yeah, 30 years.
So I went to see her. Nancy Mulligan was her name, and she was in Rochester. She was 81 years old. And I went up to her beautiful farmhouse and explained to her how important it was that we human females, understand how this system evolved. And she said, that's really interesting. Let me talk to my lawyers first before I give you any money. So I called her 1 week later, and she explained that her lawyers couldn't give me any money because I had no affiliation with any university, and it couldn't be a tax write-off. So I said, if I have an affiliation, will you give me the funds? And she said, yes. I had a best friend who was working at the New School for Social Research and for the dean as a secretary. Those days we called them secretaries. And she made an appointment with me. And I explained to him the situation, and he said, okay, I'll give you an affiliation. I called up Nancy Mulligan, and she said, I'll send the check immediately. Meanwhile, I had read an article in the Buffalo Evening News about a professor at the University of New York who had gone to the Amazon to study a different kind of monkey. So I called him up. I said, Dr. Kinsey, I'm a Brooklyn housewife, and I want to study Aotus. And I said, please, can I come to your office because I need to learn how to study these monkeys in the wild. And he said, okay. So I went to his office, and he explained to me how to do focal samples, how to do scan samples. He explained to me that I needed a really good pair of binoculars, that I needed image intensifiers to see in the dark, that I needed waterproof everything because in the Amazon, you're always going in boats and one can tip over at any time. Wrote it all down, costed it all out, sent it to Nancy Mulligan, who sent the money immediately to the New School for Social Research. And I took that list that Dr. Kinsey gave me. I purchased everything on that list, and then I called him up and I said, Dr. Kinsey, thank you so much for all that you've done. I've got the money. I've got everything. I'm going to the Amazon. I'm going to study the night monkey, the first person ever. He said, no. You can't, Patricia Wright. You can't do that because I have a paper right in front of me that was written by Dr. Richard Thorington, the head of mammals at the Smithsonian Institution. And he says that he couldn't study Aotus. He tried to do it in Panama, and he had radio collars that he put on him, and you don't have enough money for radio collars. He says it's absolutely impossible to study this monkey.
Because you can't find them at night?
Can't find them at night because they go to the tops of the trees, and then your radio collars very often don't work, and they go fast. So I said, thank you, and I hung up, and I remember I cried because I had spent all the money, or much of it already.
You bought all the stuff.
Yeah, I had a ticket, I had everything. So I decided I was just going to do it. So I went down to the Amazon.
Really quick, what did your husband say?
He said, I got to go too. So when we went down to the Amazon, I took my husband, who was an artist. And so he brought all his paints and things. And I brought by this time, she was almost 3 years old, daughter. I had chosen the place to go because it was at the foothills of the Andes, and it was a little higher elevation. I thought it'd be better for Amanda's health, because the deep, dark rainforest, there's a lot of, it's hot and humid and mosquitoes and all kinds of things. But when we got to that place, we had to get there by going over the Andes. You know that they're one of the highest mountains in the whole world. Yes. And you get, altitude sickness as you go up over those Andes. And my husband was like 6'2", and we were in a collectivo taxi because that's all we could afford. Yeah, we made it to the other side of the Andes. And then we found out that area had been totally deforested for coffee plantations. And there weren't any monkeys. Nobody had seen a monkey there for 25 years. So I went into the small airport there, and I had pictures of my monkeys, and I showed them a picture. And they laughed, and they said, "Mushmuki," because they recognized the monkey. And they said, yes. I said, "Donde están los monos?" in my beautiful Spanish. I didn't know any Spanish hardly. And so they said yes, and we took off that afternoon for the Amazon jungle. And I remember going in this little Cessna plane over the incredible mountains, and on the other side, that sheer expanse, like a rug almost, of beautiful canopy, unbroken by roads, unbroken by anything. And then there was a river. And we went toward that river, and then suddenly we were bump, bump, bump on the ground. It was a mud airstrip. And I turned to the person that was getting our luggage out of the plane and said, "Donde está Hotel Turista?" And he laughed and laughed and laughed. They'd never seen a tourist before. But anyway, there was a place where people came off the river and stayed. Probably the worst place I've ever stayed in my life. There were huge spiders the size of my fist on the walls. No mattresses on the bed. No kind of bathroom or toilet at all. We got through that first night. And then I asked the hotel owner, is there some place where I could go to find this kind of monkey? And showed him the picture. And he called over a Campa Indian, and he asked if, he obviously were nodding. I couldn't understand what they were saying. And he said, yes, go with them. So we loaded everything into this dugout canoe, and we took off up the river, and we arrived at a place that was a farm. He was a farmer, and he didn't know anything about the forest, but he found this neighbor that could take us into the forest. And so that's the first time that I ever was looking for monkeys in the wild. And we couldn't find them. For the first day, for the second day, going off in the night was not what the people like to do. It's scary in the night because there's jaguars, there's poisonous snakes, a million billion mosquitoes that are buzzing all around you. And it was like not what this guy wanted to do. So the third night, he didn't show up. So I said to Jim, my husband, I said, "You take care of Amanda. I'm going out in that forest alone." And I thought, there weren't any trails or anything, but I had, marking tape. I had bright fluorescent tape, and I had made a kind of a trail, and I was following it. I followed it into the forest, and as soon as it got dark, it was the dark of the moon, so I couldn't see my hand in front of my face, and I couldn't see those flagging tapes anywhere. So
no flashlight?
I did have a flashlight, yes. When I shined that flashlight around, I suddenly heard a kind of sound, and I knew that was the sound of the owl monkey. So I said, okay, I'll quit being terrified, which I was, and I will just follow this monkey. So I sat down, and he was up above, and every time I heard a sound, I shined my flashlight. And then the monkey started to move, and I was able to hear him enough to follow him because he didn't go very far. And I remember thinking, I'm going to live through this night. I can't believe it. I'm going to live through this night because it was almost 5 a.m. And then I heard something coming in the forest, and it was more than one animal. and they were on the ground, and they were heading right toward me. And I thought, oh my God, it must be wild boars, because I'd been reading a lot about the Amazon, and I knew there was these large boars that came in herds, but they had really bad eyesight, and they could just run you right down, trample you. So I said, okay, I'm going to get up into a tree. So I climbed up in a tree, and I sat there, and all those animals went by me. By this time, my flashlight was totally out, and I never saw what they were, but I'm pretty sure they were wild boars now after my experience with staying in the Amazon a lot longer. And I just held on to this tree until it was full daylight. And all of a sudden, I heard above me, a, it was a night monkey. And I looked up, and there was the angriest night monkey I'd ever seen. He had all his hair was standing on end, and he was jumping in the tree, exclaiming at me that I shouldn't be there. I was in his territory, and he was urinating on me and defecating on me, and I was the happiest I'd ever been in my life.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
It was the first time I'd ever seen them in the wild. Behind him was his partner, and after they told me off for about 15 minutes, it was broad daylight, and they just went right into a hole in the tree. I knew that they had one sleeping site because we had a home in Cape Cod, and we had let them out in the trees, and I had practiced following my pets on Cape Cod, and I knew that they always came back to our little cabin to sleep inside. So I thought, aha. And so I wrapped a flagging tape around that tree, and I did have a compass. And they always said, if you get lost, the river is on your right. So I just went directly right till I hit the river, and then there were settlements, and they knew about me. I didn't know about them, but they knew about me. They knew where to take me home after that long night. And that was the beginning of the first study of the behavior and ecology of owl monkeys ever done.
And you're the only scientist that had ever seen them.
Yeah, and had ever studied them. And so so after 6 months, I had enough data to write my first paper that was published in 1978.
Did you stay there that time?
For the whole 6 months. Yeah. And that was
unbelievable.
And followed them every night from that time on.
Wow.
Took a while. I would lose them, and then I would build a path to where I had seen them go. And then the next night I would have a path to as far until I lost them. And because they can't see really well in the dark either, I was able to follow them. And it was great. It was wonderful.
So this marks the end of your time as a Brooklyn housewife, pretty much, right? Now you're like a scientist.
Yes. Dr. Warren Kinsey said, you have to go to graduate school, you know. And I said, no, I can work. And he said, no way. He said, you have to go to graduate school. And so that's how I started graduate school, my scientific career.
Of course, once you got to graduate school, everybody knew about you because, I mean, pretty famous at this point in the primatology world, right?
Yes, but I still had to, you have to do a dissertation. It has to be a real scientific work. And that in primatology, that means you have to stay in the rainforest for over a year to get all the different cycles of the rain patterns and everything to really understand the behavior. So I spent about a year and a half in the Amazon, and I brought my little girl. By the time I finally got to do my dissertation research, she was 7 years old, and she came with me. And I was homeschooler as well as studying for my dissertation. But she loved it. Oh, my God, she loved it.
Who wouldn't have loved that? What a childhood.
She would go out with the ornithologists, the bird studiers, and people that were studying the giant otters. She went out with them in her little raft and followed them. And it was just like, for her, a dream come true. And she loves and still loves botany. And she'd see these beautiful flowers, and she'd go off with the botanist to study them. So she had quite an amazing time. So after I finally got home, after a year and a half of studying in the Amazon, and I was writing up my, it's hard to believe that this was before computers. So I was typing on a typewriter. We did have electric typewriters then.
We're still in the 70s now, though.
At the end of the 70s, the beginning of the 80s.
Okay.
I suddenly got a telephone call from somebody who had a kind of Texas drawl. And he said, I am Dr. Elwyn Simons. I can't do a Texas drawl. And I really need you here at the Duke University Primate Center. And I said, you do? And he said, yes, because I have received an NSF grant to go to Borneo and bring back 12 tarsiers. You know what tarsiers are? He asked. And I said, yes, I know. They're, because I'd been to graduate school, right? I knew that they were tiny primates that live in Asia and eat nothing but live animal prey. And he wanted to start a reproductive colony in the States to study their behavior. Nobody had ever done that before. So I said, yes, well, I have traveled with nocturnal primates before. And he said, okay, I want you here in 3 months. And I said, you better talk to my advisor because I'm not finished with writing my dissertation. I'm just inputting data. So we talked to my advisor. My advisor said, Duke University, it's a great university, good place to go. You can write your dissertation while you're working for Dr. Simons. Within 3 months, I was in Borneo. I did find it was an incredible time. You know, being in Asia in the rainforest is just outstanding. I saw the gibbons and I saw all kinds of beautiful animals in addition to the tarsiers. And then he called me into his office and he said, you see that picture above my desk? I said, yes. And it kind of looked like an animal that reminded me of a squirrel, actually. He said, that is a lemur that we think is extinct in the wild. If you can, please go to Madagascar and find out if it's extinct or not. I'd heard of Madagascar, but I didn't know anything about the lemurs in Madagascar. And then I said, when do you want me to go? And so in another few months, I was taking off for that extraordinary island, isolated from Africa for over 100 million years, where everything on this island is new to science. It has unique species found nowhere else on Earth. And as I flew over it, I got so sad because there's so much of it. I'd gone over Borneo and seen beautiful, beautiful rainforest. When I got to Madagascar, it was all gone. It had been destroyed. There were just patches of small forest. And I was very sad by the time I landed. And then there were other things that Dr. Simons hadn't told me. Madagascar was very, very poor. And it didn't have any roads. And the roads that it did have were almost impassable. Very few vehicles at all. And in order to find the places where this bamboo lemur had been last seen, I was going to have to travel on those roads. So I called up Dr. Simons, and it cost $9 a minute to call him by landline. And I said, how am I going to travel around this country? Nobody has any 4x4 vehicles. He said, no, I've already sent one. It's going to come into the port this week, and it'll be there. So you can go and travel.
Did you speak French at the time?
No, by that time I was speaking pretty good Spanish. And so I arrived on an island, which is, the island of Madagascar was taken over by the French in 1895. And so business was conducted in French. And the people, the Malagasy people, speak Malagasy, its very own language spoken nowhere else on earth. And so I was trying to speak French. I had like a year in high school, and it was a long time ago. So I did my best.
But I mean, to really think about this scene in the 80s, the difference of life then anyway, right? No contact really, $9 a minute phone call if you need to call somebody, but you also have to get somewhere where there's a phone.
Yeah, you have to have a landline.
Right. And otherwise, you don't have any contact anywhere off the island. There's no internet. You don't know where you are. You don't know the language. That doesn't even exist anymore, showing up in a place like that. It just, you can research everything. You can Google it, right? It's such a different, it's almost like you went to another planet.
It very much was like going to another planet in so many different ways. In the communication, but in the ways people thought. I mean, I went to the only department store in the capital, and I walked in, and all of the shelves were empty. And there was one shelf that had some bananas. This was a country that had been cut off from the Western world for over a decade. There had been a revolution in the early 70s. The person that took over to lead the country only dealt with North Korea, with Cuba, the Soviet Union, and China. So there was no trade whatsoever for a decade. And that's why the roads were in such bad repair, because they all decayed.
And you were amongst like the first people from the U.S. or Europe to even be allowed in the country, right? The biologists, the scientists.
Yes. And the reason why is the president trusted academics. It was interesting. He trusted academics, but not any governments. So we were there before USAID and before the U.S. Embassy even. So it was a real pioneering experience.
But when you get there and you're like, okay, I'm supposed to find the greater bamboo lemur, how do you even begin? Like, what do you do?
So I had done my homework. So I knew where they had last been seen. And I knew where those places were on a map. I started out by driving to those places, which took days and days to get to these remote areas. And everywhere I went, I was so disappointed because the forest had been chopped down. And there wasn't any forest there anymore. There was just, this kind of grass that grows up when you destroy the rainforest. It was a very discouraging first couple months. And then suddenly I realized that we weren't going to see that greater bamboo lemur. And in that discouraged mindset, I came to Ranomafana, which was a little village. Ranomafana means hot water in the local language. And there was a old tourist hotel from the 1920s. And it said Hotel Thermal, which meant hot mineral springs. And we had been just camping for months, and we hadn't had anything like a hot bath. And I thought, hot mineral springs, this means that we're going to be actually having a hot bath. So we drove up and reserved a room. But there was no hot water in that hotel. And the toilets hadn't worked for a very long time. But there was a bath that the French had set up. So we did get to have a hot bath the next morning. And after that, I approached the hotel owner and I said, is there any way that I can get into that forest? Because I saw a forest behind those hot mineral springs, and it had bamboo. And she said, yes, I know some local guides that'll take you in. And so that was how we met Lorraine and Emile, our first guides. And when they took us into that forest, it was one of the scariest moments of my life, because there was a river that went between us and that forest. And over that river, it was cascading waterfalls, really. And there was a bridge, and it was made out of from trees that were cut down and planks. I mean, I thought I was going to go over and be gone. But we made it to the other side. I'm scared of heights, so it was particularly frightening for me. We got to the other side, and it was like a rainforest. Huge trees, beautiful, beautiful rainforest. And I said, this is where I want to camp. And so we camped, and we started looking for lemurs. I think it was about 3 or 4 days before we started seeing lemurs, because they were hunted and ran away. But we started to see these beautiful animals. I mean, they were, until you've seen a lemur in the wild, you just don't understand how beautiful they are and how when they leap, it's just like you go, ah, every time. Even now, I have to suppress my wonder at how they're leaping and my awe. So I was really excited. It was mountainous because most of the rainforest that used to be is now cut in the flat areas. Mountainous area, cold in the mornings. And one morning, I got up with my graduate student. My graduate student, Deborah Overdorf, came with me for that walk to look for the bamboo lemurs. And we were walking along a trail when suddenly I heard something to the right. And it was something like almost a motor. It was a moo, and it got higher and louder and louder. And I looked, and there was a lemur. It was like orange colored, and it was staring at me, trying to scare me away. And I was like, oh my God, it's in the bamboo. Oh my goodness, it must be a bamboo lemur. I thought that I had discovered the greater bamboo lemur, which we had come to see. And I was just amazed and surprised. And it disappeared after about almost a minute. And then it just disappeared into the forest. And I called back to Deborah and I said, did you see it? Did you see it? And she said, I heard it, but she was behind and she hadn't seen it. I thought that was the greater bamboo lemur, but I was wrong. Because 1 week later, we were out in the forest and we saw a totally different species eating bamboo that was gray and much bigger than that first species that I'd seen. It had white ear tufts, and that was the greater bamboo lemur. What I had seen first was a new species to science. I mean, it was amazing. It was in the New York Times. It was everywhere. We had discovered a diurnal lemur in Madagascar new to science. A big deal. A really
Huge
big
deal.
deal.
A huge deal.
So excited. So I wrote a National Geographic project proposal to study these two species that were both found in the same forest. And we really wanted to understand what they did different, if they're both eating bamboo. And we wanted to describe it as a new species. So we went back. We determined for sure they were different species. And in 1987 was a paper describing this new species to science, the golden bamboo lemur.
So cool. That's unbelievable.
I got that grant, and as I'm settling down to to record what they're doing differently, the timber exploiters came in and started to cut down that beautiful forest. You would hear the donk, donk. They did it by hand. They were doing it with hand axes, chopping down huge trees. And then when the huge trees went down, they took like 8, 9 trees with them. So this huge hole in the forest. And all the lemurs were scared and ran away. And my study of the bamboo lemur was being destroyed. I was a research scientist, so I was especially concerned about that my research was being interrupted. So I, yelled at the people that were chopping down the forest, which of course is, like crazy because you have to go to where the source is.
Of course.
So I went to the Capitol and I talked to the director of Water and Forest. And I explained to him that he had to protect this area. And he said to me, those timber concessions are legal. I signed the documents to allow those people to chop down that forest. It's not illegal. And I said, no, but you didn't know about the new species to science. I mean, you didn't know about the one that we found that we thought was extinct. It's different now. You have to take those concessions back. And he said, Madame Patricia, you don't understand where you are. You are in Madagascar, one of the poorest countries in the world. We can't afford to make a protected area there. We can't afford it because it costs money to make the maps. It costs money to train the guardians and the rangers. It costs money to put in the infrastructure for a national park. We do not have that kind of money. And then he stopped and he pointed to me and he said, Madam Patricia, if you find the money, we'll do everything in our power to help you make that national park. And then he escorted me out of that room, his office, into the halls, and I just stood there. I was saying to myself, no. I don't have any training in making a national park. I don't have any training in courting millions of dollars to make a national park.
Although it seems to be a theme in your life that people give you impossible tasks and somehow you do them.
And then I thought about that golden bamboo lemur and those greater bamboo lemurs and what would happen if I didn't find that money. They would go extinct. And I knew that. And I couldn't let that happen. So we did our best to find that money. First, I wrote a USAID grant for pretty close to $4 million to make a national park. But I had no idea about how to make a national park.
How would you, right?
Right. And so I went back to the director and I said, how do we do this? And he said, the first thing we got to do is we got to go around to the villages to talk to them about what it would mean to have a national park in their backyard. And so we started from the very beginning with the communities. We talked to them about what it would mean. I mean, it's like talking to an American about, okay, from now on, you are going to be prohibited to going to Walmart. You just deal.
Yeah.
And so they said, well, we need schools so that they can, go to high school. They can get jobs. We need health care. Our people have to walk 2 days to get to a healthcare clinic. And, after 2 days, you're not in any condition to survive. And we need economic help, because if we could possibly get our rice paddies back in shape, because they've been the little dams that we had have been destroyed, and now we have to. We really need help with our rice, and this is a rice eating country. But the USAID grant wasn't big enough because they didn't include schools and they didn't include the clinics. They included the infrastructure for the park and a little bit of economic assistance. And that's when I realized that when you're going to do conservation, it can't be just one or two focuses. It has to be an inclusive, integrated approach. Luckily, Liz Claiborne found out about us. Liz Claiborne, the fashion designer, gave us $500,000 to help with the health team.
How did she find out about you?
Oh, that was quite a story. Because the MacArthur Foundation also found out about this. And I didn't know this, but I suddenly received a message from, in those days we did have, we had Morse code or something that they actually sent messages. And somebody brought me a message that said, you should call this number collect, which you cannot call any numbers collect in Madagascar, because there is something to do with a foul ship, is what I was written. So I had to finish my 5-day sample of collecting data on my lemurs, and then I drove 3 hours to the phone that I could call back at. And by the time I got there, it was Friday afternoon, and the banks were closed. So I only had like 30,000 ariary, which are 30,000 Malagasy francs. So I could only pay for 3 minutes. And I told the operator this, because we had operators in those days. So they called the number, and they answered on the other side of the MacArthur Foundation. And I said, "This is Patricia Wright. I'm calling you from Madagascar." And she said, "Oh, wait. I have to have the program officer talk to you. It's good news." I waited as the minutes go by. I know I can only have 3 minutes. And finally, Ken Hope got on the line and he said, "Patricia Wright, I have good news for you. You are the winner of the Genius Award. You now are a MacArthur Fellow for this year, which was 1989. I was extremely excited, except I had no idea what a MacArthur Genius Award was. I said, thank you very much. And he said, well, there's been 25 people from the whole world selected this year, and you are one of them. Click.
Cut off.
Totally cut off from the phone. And I'm sitting there, MacArthur grant, MacArthur Fellowship. I had no idea. But what it meant was almost $250,000 that was given to me to spend on anything that I wanted to spend it on. And there was only one thing I wanted to spend it on, and that was making a national park in Madagascar. So it was part of that money that we used to make it happen.
Awesome. And then you got the Liz Claiborne money.
Yes, because they heard about the fellowship. Right. They heard that I was a MacArthur genius. Anyway, we made that national park in 1991. The Ranomafana National Park was inaugurated, 43,000 hectares. It goes from 600 meters to 1,500 meters, a beautiful rainforest. And I'm proud to say that that's almost the same dimensions of the rainforest that we created in 91 are still there.
Incredible. And how many species of lemurs are there in that park?
Yes, there used to be 12, but now we've got 15 species because we found other new species to science contained in that national park. So it was pretty exciting.
How many parks does Madagascar have total?
When we created the new national park, there were only 3, and now there are 18 national parks.
Oh, thank God.
Yes, so we created the first environmental action plan countrywide. And in that 15-year environmental action plan was the plans to have 18 national parks created.
That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be in a country where environmental programs are a priority. And so one of the most important parts of this these plans were first to create protected areas, and next to actually reforest Madagascar, to actually be able to plant endemic trees and to spread those protected areas out, because 90% of the forest is gone. And we're the pioneers in planting endemic trees to expand the forest and the national parks outward.
That's happening?
That's what's happening now.
Right. That needs to be happening in so many places. When you were talking about Borneo and what Borneo looked like in the 80s, like now you fly over Borneo and it's all palm. Rainforest is 80% gone.
Palm. Yeah, it's gone now and replaced with palm oil.
All you see are palm trees. It's horrifying.
And that's a green desert.
Right.
Because those palm trees are from somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all the unbelievable rainforest species are gone and replaced with just palm oil.
It's devastating. And so from Madagascar, though, this is your other home. It's your home for this since the 80s. Do you still spend half your year there?
Oh, yes. I mean, the great thing, I did move from Duke to Stony Brook University because they provided me that opportunity of teaching for one semester and spending the other semester in Madagascar, working on research, working on organizing a tremendous research station there. I used to say the largest research station in all of Africa, but now I have to say the second largest.
Where's the largest?
It's in Rwanda. Ellen DeGeneres just helped with the Gorilla Foundation and creating a very large research station there.
The research station in Madagascar is, I've heard about it and I've read about it. It's unbelievable.
It really is. Yeah. We can do a lot of things at a research station that you can't do without it. For example, we can do genetics. We have 2 -80-degree freezers and a liquid nitrogen generating machine so that we can actually do the genetics of the rainforest right next to the rainforest. We don't have to bring samples back from Madagascar to the States. We can do it there. We also have built an herbarium right there next to the rainforest that's taking plant samples so that people can identify the plants very quickly. We have insect collections, and It's a real research station there right next to the rainforest, and it employs a lot of people. Now we have about 135, 140 people that have full-time jobs all year round, local people from that region. We have a health team that goes out to remote areas. We have our education team, which started a long time ago, but now we work in 75 villages doing reforestation, doing education, doing health. And so we're constantly working with the villages surrounding the park so they feel a part of the protection of the park.
And they feel they own it now, right?
That's right.
They do, but there's an ownership over protecting everybody.
So recently we realized that some of the people that we have on staff are getting a little older and that we better, train the next generation of research scientists or research assistants that are helping the scientists and park rangers and tourist guides. Tourism is just a really big industry now. And instead of one hotel, we've got like 32 hotels. And I highly recommend that all of you come over and visit Ranomafana and Madagascar because we have facilities for you to go. We got roads. They're still not very good, but we have roads. So I'm encouraging everybody to come over and see this research station.
Yes, and to see this park.
Yes. Oh, it's a beautiful place.
And to see these lemurs.
Oh, they're so incredible.
See them in the wild. So, obviously things in a lot of ways are a lot better. There's 18 national parks. There's roads. There's more money. People have jobs. But in the bigger picture of what's happening with the world and the planet and the climate, how does Madagascar, it's definitely better than it was.
Better than it was, but it still needs help. It's a large island. It's 1,000 miles long. It's like if you placed it next to the States, it would go from Maine to Florida. So there's a lot of work to be done with that reforestation, bringing the lemurs back. Some of them are so near extinction. There's only 17 or 25 individuals left. I would like to say that for the Golden Bamboo Lemur, it's basically doubled the population size since we started. But that's not for all the lemurs. Right. We haven't been so lucky to have that opportunity to reproduce.
Right.
So we still need a lot of help in Madagascar. And we need more research stations in Madagascar to get more research done about the different lemur species. There's 110 species of lemurs now.
That's incredible.
And 94% of them are in danger of extinction. So we do need help.
How can people help?
Well, I think they can help our organization. We're small, but we're doing a lot of things in Madagascar. And I work at Stony Brook University. And so the centralvalbio.org, O-R-G, is attached to the site in Stony Brook.
And we'll have links to all of this, too, on our website.
Yes, and we also have a small NGO called Wise Tropics Incorporated that also is doing a lot of work, especially in education in Madagascar. So we'll put that link on your site too. Thank you.
Pat, thank you so much for this. Thank you. Like I was saying earlier, your whole life has been such an adventure and you've done so much good in the world through this massive adventure that you've lived. It's really awesome.
And we're not done yet. There's a lot of work to do.
To learn more about Patricia, about lemurs, to read Patricia's books, go to our website, speciesunite.com. We will have links to everything. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Species Unite. If you have a spare moment and could do us a favor, please subscribe, rate, review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps people find the show. If you'd like to support the podcast, we would greatly appreciate it. Go to our website, speciesunite.com, and click donate. I would like to thank everyone at Species Unite, including Gary Knudsen, Caitlin Pierce, Amy Jones, Paul Healy, Santina Polke, Sam Kosel, and Anna Kolner, who wrote and performed today's music. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.